Hi, friends. Welcome back to Indistinct Chatter. I'm Eliza, and a lot of you seem to like hearing about conspiracy theories, and I love going down those rabbit holes. So I figured today we would explore at least one really big one. But before we put our tinfoil hats on, I wanted to just gab a little with you. So we have been having some sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say crazy weather, but it's been interesting this summer. As you know, Colorado has been in a drought for like most of my life, but damn, did it get hot this summer. And summer's not even over yet. So we aren't necessarily in the clear. Like we might get some of those scorchers still. And of course, our pool was out of service for like all of June and July, or most of it at least. A neighbor told us the office told him that it was because the water heater was busted. I don't know. I feel like no one would have tattled on them to the inspectors, but whatever. It's back open now, so that's all that matters. We've also gotten quite a bit of clappers, which I am loving. And when we get these thunderstorms, we get them for like a week at a time. Hearing the thunder echo through the canyon is such a trip. Like growing up in the Midwest, we got some rumblers. We got some smack around bowling balls in the sky type of thunderstorms. But coming through the canyon, it sounds like a bowling ball is going through a tin pipe or something. It's so cool. Plus, the lightning is just so amazing to watch. I sit on my patio and I just watch the sky constantly. Well, not constantly, but you know what I mean. And obviously, this rain is very much needed with the drought and the fires. Although sadly, because of the fires and the drought, with all this rain, there are a lot of, it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet because the rain comes with its own set of dangers that can be just as bad as the fire. Like there's mudslides, landslides, extreme flooding. People are losing their homes, their lives. But back to the skies. Did anyone stay up to catch the meteor shower overnight on the 12th/13th? I tried. I saw that the peak time was between like 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. here. Well, guess when I fell asleep? 2 a.m. And guess when I woke up? 5 a.m. Oh, like I fell asleep for just the peak time. I did catch one meteor. It was kind of cloudy most of the night, but I got one, and that's pretty cool. I think that's the first one I've ever seen. The sky is wild, guys. We should all be paying closer attention to the sky. And speaking of the sky, I saw a lot of people were, rightfully so, up in arms over Elon Musk accidentally crashing part of one of his spacecrafts into the moon. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, on August 5th, a discarded 4,000 kilogram, which is like, I don't know, almost 9,000 pounds or so, like 4 tons. I don't know. Don't quote me. They crash it into the far side of the moon near the Einstein crater, which I didn't know he had his own crater. So that's pretty cool. And it crashed at roughly 5,400 miles per hour. So this thing was just like drifting into space for over a year. I don't remember, like, I think it said 18 months before gravity kind of pulled it onto, an accidental collision course to the moon. And when it made contact, the energy force was said to be equivalent to roughly 3 tons of TNT. So when I was seeing everybody talking about this online, I was like, holy shit. Like, are we in danger? Are pieces of the moon going to go flying off into space and onto Earth? Luckily, we were not in any danger, and that's not how it works. Turns out we actually crash things into the moon on purpose, sometimes. With nearly 60 years of lunar exploration, space agencies have intentionally crashed dozens of rocket stages, science probes, and orbital landers into the moon. We've left roughly 200 tons of material on the moon's surface, and a good chunk of that was done on purpose. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, I guess, we trash our own planet. Why not the moon and space, right? And honestly, I'm just as annoyed and confused as you for the most part. But I did find out that there is some reasoning behind it, some scientific reasoning behind the littering of the moon. Whether it's right or wrong, I'll let you decide. Or, I mean, we can let the aliens decide. I don't know. So during the Apollo missions back in 1969 and the early 70s, NASA crashed the SIVBs of Apollo 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 into the moon. Seismometers had already been set up on the moon, on the surface of the moon by Apollo astronauts, and by crashing these heavy rocket stages into the moon's surface at known speeds and known locations, scientists could have a better accuracy measuring the resulting shock waves. This, I guess this kind of helps researchers map the thickness and the density of the lunar crust, kind of like a sonogram just for the moon, in a way, maybe. Also, from the Apollo missions, once astronauts reunited with the main command module in orbit, the expendable upper halves of their landing modules were commanded to crash. So this included Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17, although for 16, the Orion, flight controllers temporarily lost control, which delayed the crash by a few weeks. And it wasn't just the 60s and 70s. In 2009, NASA's LCROSS, lacrosse, I don't know if that's what they call it, they sent its Centaur rocket stage and its instrumentation shepherding spacecraft. NASA also sent a couple more spacecraft in 2012 and another in 2014. And we aren't the only country doing this. Japan sent one in 2009, China sent one in 2020, and these were all on purpose. It's how we've confirmed the existence of water ice hidden in the moon's darkest craters. It's how we've mapped gravity and studied the moon's dust, among a bunch of other reasons, I'm sure. You guys know my issues with space, so I didn't spend too much time digging into it for fear of getting into a black hole rather than a rabbit hole. Now, I am personally on our moon side. I don't like the idea of all this shit that we put out there in space and on her surface, like literally trash. Where's it going? Is it going to crash back to us? Is it going to crash into something else and create a mess of problems in the future? I don't know. That's kind of where I get a little too spirally. So instead, I took the route of going down a conspiracy theory that everyone has likely been introduced to. The moon landing was fake. A tale as old as time. Well, not really. Various groups claimed NASA knowingly misled the public, but the theory started gaining traction in the mid, 1970s. Bill Kaysing, a former technical writer who briefly worked at Rocketdyne, aka the company that made rocket engines, self-published a book in 1976 called We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion swindle. So Bill is positioned as this insider, right? He's got all this secret knowledge, and he lays out what sounds like a pretty reasonable argument. NASA didn't have the tech. Radiation would kill you. The photos are obviously fake. And look, the government was already lying about Vietnam and Watergate. Why not the moon? It kind of makes sense if you don't know how cameras work or how radiation shielding works, which for some conspiracy theories, that's kind of the point. Most people don't know that information. So how can we dispel it? Now, I wasn't there. I can't say with 100% certainty whether it was real or not, but just for funsies, let's walk through some of his claims and break them down a little bit, okay? First, let's talk about the radiation thing. It's scary, it's technical, it's sciencey. They make scary movies about radiation all the time, right? Bill argued that the Van Allen radiation belts, these belts of radiation surrounding the Earth, would kill astronauts on the spot. Bing, bang, boom, done. Basically, the radiation would fry them. It would fry the cameras and the film that they were carrying. It would fry literally everything. So how could NASA possibly have solved that? Well, it's NASA. They're not idiots. Again, hey, I don't work there. I guess I can't say with 100% certainty of that, but they don't give me idiot vibes. And NASA didn't solve this in some mind-boggling big way. They kind of did the whole work smarter, not harder thing. The Apollo spacecraft followed a flight path that went through the thinnest part of the Van Allen belts near the equator, and they just floored it. The entire passage through the radiation belts took less than an hour, 52 minutes to be precise. And in those 52 minutes, the astronauts received about 11.4 rads of radiation. A lethal dose of radiation is 300 rads in 1 hour. Okay, they received in less than an hour 11.4 rads. On top of that, they had lightweight aluminum and stainless steel shielding the aircraft for extra protection. So, yes, technically, you could argue that they didn't get radiation poisoning because it was fake, but you could also argue that they were just in, the safe zone, so to speak, as far as radiation goes. Then the next claim is about this whole missing crater situation. Bill said if a rocket engine landed the lunar module, it should have dug a crater into the surface, but it didn't. So, as we've learned over the years, the moon's soil isn't the same as our own soil. It's actually this incredibly fine dust. It's powdery. And from what I read, the descent didn't have enough thrust to create much of a penetrating impact into that fine, dusty powder. Instead, the energy from the engine dispersed across the loose soil instead of compacting it downward. Rocket exhaust behaves in a vacuum, like you're in space. So imagine you have this large container packed tightly with like powdered sugar. On the surface, it's loose, it's light, it's fluffy, but just an inch or two beneath that yummy, delicious, airy powder is heavily compacted, dense, basically solid, still yummy and delicious, powdered sugar. If you punch down, you're going to make a hole, a messy one, but you'll see that you've left a crater behind. But if you blow across the top, it's going to puff up in the air, flakes are going to fly away instantly. But the compacted stuff below what you just blew off, it's going to hold its shape, right? Like in order to make a dent, you'd have to blow a lot to loosen that up. So on Earth, our atmosphere acts like an invisible wall. It squeezes rocket exhaust into a tight, narrow, but punchy column. If you've ever watched a rocket take off, you know what I'm talking about. That column, like the smoke column, the fire, whatever, it creates this drill and it punches straight down into our dirt. But in space, there is no air pressure to hold the gas together. The moment the exhaust leaves the rocket engine nozzle, it immediately balloons out sideways in all directions instead of like the narrow drill-like exhaust that we see on Earth. So the energy sweeps horizontally across the moon's surface, just like blowing across the surface of our powdered sugar. Instead of a hole or a crater, we just get streaks across the surface. Plus, the spacecraft, if you believe we went there, didn't even fire the engine all the way to the ground. They used these really long, dangling touch sensor probes that were hanging off the launching pads to hold it 3 to 5 feet in the air. Then, Bill also talks about the stars. Bill points out that in these photos from the moon, the sky is completely black, no stars. You would think with no light pollution, you'd have incredible sights of the stars, right? Yes, you absolutely would have a better light show up there. But the cameras were one, older, and two, set to photograph the astronauts and the moon's surface, both of which are brightly lit by the sun. When photographing bright features, you want to use a fast shutter speed and a small aperture. That means the camera can only let in a certain amount of light. For example, when I snapped a picture of the meteor the other night, my shutter speed was set really, really low, and I had a larger aperture. Plus, cell phone cameras have come a long way, but I digress. Basically, the stars were too dim to register for these cameras back then. You can't exactly take a photo during the day with stars visible behind you. You know what I'm saying? And that's the same as on the moon. Now, should they have brought a camera to take photos of the stars? Yeah, duh. Absolutely. But hey, lessons learned, I suppose. Or did they have the right camera, but just forgot to put stars on their fake backdrop? Dun, dun, dun. Bill also pointed to deaths in the Apollo program, and this is a big one. People really did die, and it's really sad. It's scary. He's not wrong about that at all. The Apollo 1 fire in 1967 killed astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. After that fire, a guy named Thomas Barron, a quality control inspector at Kennedy Space Center, wrote a real report that you can find on nasa.gov from their historical reference collection. The conspiracy theory version and Thomas's report are two different stories, so bear with me here. So Thomas worked for North American Aviation, which is the contractor who was building the spacecraft. And wouldn't you know, Thomas found some real problems. Typical problems, and I'm sure we've all had these at our jobs, especially if you've ever had to work with a vendor or work in like construction or anything like that. Anyway, the problems included poor coordination between people, lack of communication, safety lapses, people being constantly reassigned before they understood their jobs, contamination issues, corners being cut to stay on schedule, all that good stuff. He sent his concerns up the chain, and as it so often happens, most of them were ignored. So Thomas did what any whistleblower would do. He leaked his findings to the media. He was subsequently fired, and he was fired right before the Apollo 1 fire. And then, about a week after he testified before Congress about these problems, Thomas and his entire family died in a car train crash. That's true. That's the true version. It's very sad. Now, this is where the conspiracy version of this says Thomas's 500-page report disappeared. It was buried, burned, we don't know, intentionally, unintentionally, we don't know, but it's gone. And his death was very suspicious. It reeks of a cover-up. However, like I said, I gave it away already. The report is in the NASA archives and it's available for you to read, so it didn't disappear. However, if it is available, was his death just a sad, tragic coincidence? Or was it a cover-up that was just too late? Again, I'll let you decide. But it is worth mentioning. When Thomas had testified to Congress about these problems, one of his key sources was a guy named Melvin Holmberg. Thomas claimed Melvin knew exactly what caused the fire, and Melvin testified that Thomas basically got all of his info from anonymous phone calls and hearsay. This ultimately led to Thomas's credibility being downplayed. So, was that the first attempt to silence Thomas? Or just someone not wanting to get in trouble? Or did Thomas lie? And if he lied, why would he be murdered? See what I mean about conspiracies? They kind of take off in all different directions. They really web out. It's really fun. I have one more argument Bill made, and this is another one that kind of sounds pretty compelling when you first hear about it, or see it, really. There's this famous photo from the moon taken by Neil Armstrong. It shows shadows cast by Buzz Aldrin and some other objects on the lunar surface. But if you look closely, the shadows aren't parallel. They're going in different directions. If the sun was the only light source, all the shadows should point the same way, right? They should all be parallel, but they're not. So there must be multiple light sources, like studio lights, which means it was filmed in a studio on Earth. Sounds pretty logical if you don't think about it too hard, right? But another thing we know, the moon's surface isn't flat. It's not a stage. It's got hills, dips, craters, rocks, all kinds of uneven terrain. And when light hits uneven terrain, the shadows don't behave the way they do on a flat surface. Plus, there's this thing called perspective. So when you're taking a 2D photo of a 3D landscape, parallel lines can appear non-parallel just because of the angle and distance. Artists have actually been using this for centuries. It's called perspective distortion. You've probably seen it yourself without even realizing it. Take, for instance, let's say you're standing on railroad tracks and you're looking down them. Like, you're not looking at the track, you're looking forward down the tracks, if that makes sense. The tracks appear to converge in the distance, like they'll eventually come to a point and touch. But you know that that's not true because you know that they are parallel to each other. They're not actually coming together. That's perspective distortion. On the moon, you've got uneven terrain, you've got the camera angle, you've got the photographer's position. All of that changes how shadows appear in a flat photo. It's not exactly evidence of multiple light sources. Also, Earth's soil absorbs light. The moon's soil reflects light. It reflects about 8% of the sunlight that hits it. Plus, you've also got these bright white spacesuits reflecting light everywhere. You've got aluminum foil on the lunar module reflecting light. You've even got Earth itself in the sky, bouncing light down onto the surface, which This was kind of a fun fact, and I think is so cute. Okay, so we call the light from the moonlight, right? And we call this the light from the sun, sunlight, or the sunshine. On the moon, the light from the earth is called earthshine. Isn't that so sweet? I don't know why I think, but I just think that's so cute. So anyway, so there are multiple sources of illumination, but they're not necessarily studio lights hidden off camera, right? They're just kind of like, they're just how light works when you're on the moon. Or, who's to say? Maybe they are studio cameras. Once again, I wasn't there. I can't be 100% certain. I have a healthy distrust in our government. For all I know, AI could have been around back then and being used. Who's to say? Not me. Woo. But what got me down this age old rabbit hole was, of course, an Instagram post showing quote unquote evidence that the moon landing was faked. It had some of Bill's arguments in there, but there were a couple more arguments, pieces of evidence that I've heard people talk about over the years. I've seen it floating around online. First, there's this photo of a footprint on the moon. You've probably seen it. The footprint has clear ridges, clear threads. It looks like someone stepped in fresh mud almost, and the boot print has a very specific pattern. Then you compare that photo to Neil Armstrong's boots at the Smithsonian. It's like his whole suit. And then you can see the bottom. His boots have a very smooth sole, and they certainly do not match the footprint in that photo. So the footprint is fake, or it's left by someone else, or the suit in the Smithsonian isn't his suit, right? Well, I did some minor sleuthing. A quick Google search actually brought me to the Smithsonian's website. Armstrong and Aldrin didn't wear just regular old boots on the moon. They weren't rocking Doc Martens or whatever, which, little side note here, I got my Doc Martens like 6 years ago, and they are still not broken in. When do they ever get broken in? I have to wear 2 pairs of socks to not get blisters. How are people raw dogging these boots? I don't understand. Honestly, if you're thinking of getting Doc Martens, get used ones. Get like 20-year-old ones that are already broken in because holy shit. Anyway, these guys, Armstrong and Aldrin, they wore lunar overshoes. They're these, these extra protective footwear boot cover things, basically. That's the scientific term, right? And they were designed specifically for the moon's surface. Those shoes, the protective shoes, they had rigid, treaded soles, and they match up to the print in the photo. And, not so fun fact, much like people do here on Earth, they littered. They left the overshoes behind on the moon. The boots that we see on display at the Smithsonian are part of the base suit. Now you could argue, I didn't look it up. I didn't look up what the reason was for leaving them behind. There might be a reason. Or you could argue, pretty convenient to leave the evidence behind, right? Then the other photo I see floating around is of Buzz Aldrin on the moon with our flag behind him, just kind of waving in the cool moon breeze. Only, hold on a second here. The moon doesn't have a breeze. Remember, no atmosphere means no wind. So how is the flag moving? Well, get this. NASA thinks of everything. Or they backtracked to come up with a cover-up. Who's to say? Anyway, NASA engineered that specific flag so that it wouldn't just hang limp and sad on the moon. That wouldn't really give look at us vibes, right? So they built a horizontal rod into the top of it to hold it open and keep it extended. It's pretty simple, pretty genius. But what about the ripples? Well, when Buzz was planting it down into the moon's surface, he was twisting the pole and moving it around. And what happens when you create physical motion? You create momentum. And what do we know about space and physics? Without air resistance to slow things down, objects keep moving longer than they would here on Earth. And that is what created the iconic moon breeze effect. Pretty cool, right? For the other piece of evidence I see floating around, quote unquote evidence, let's go back to what we talked about with cameras. So there are photos of Earth taken from the moon, and in some photos, Earth looks huge. In other photos taken at different distances with different cameras, Earth looks teeny tiny small. Conspiracy theorists point to this and they'll say, how can Earth be two different sizes? That doesn't make sense. The photos are obviously fake. Except it's just perspective and zoom. It's just kind of how cameras work. If I take a photo of you from 10 feet away with a wide angle lens, you're going to look small, teeny tiny little baby. If I take a photo of you from the same spot with a zoomed in telephoto lens, you're going to look larger than life, baby. Same thing with Earth from the moon. Depending on the distance the spacecraft was from Earth, the camera used, and the lens settings, Earth's going to look like a lot of different sizes. Also, while digging, I found a few more questions and pieces of quote unquote evidence regarding this whole theory. According to theorists, Stanley Kubrick was secretly hired by NASA to film the fake moon landing footage. I don't know, I guess 2001 A Space Odyssey made 2001 look so realistic at the time that obviously that meant that he had to have had the technology to fake the moon landing. And then aside from the claims of missing tapes pointing to missing or lost original Apollo footage, some people also claim that the camera technology in the 60s could not have captured what was filmed, that it was, too good for the era. Now, too good because it didn't happen, or too good because it's NASA and they have access to things we could only dream of. Now, lastly, I see this question asked a lot. If we went to the moon in 1969, not 1970, but a year sooner. If we went to the moon, why haven't we returned since 1972? If it's so easy, why don't we do it all the time? And I mean, that's a fair question. It's been over 50 years. Surely we could have by now. We're crashing things into it. Why not crash our feet on it again? Well, as you can imagine, it ain't cheap. The entire Apollo program cost roughly $25.8 billion, and that was then. Now that would be like $260 billion or more even. I don't really understand inflation or inflation calculators. And obviously, by the early 70s, America had other problems that were more important than going to the moon again. Vietnam itself was expensive. It was draining money and resources. There was a lot of social unrest, the oil crisis. And I mean, sure, there was good music, allegedly good drugs, but a lot of shit was going down back then. And something about politics, once you've achieved the goal, it gets a lot harder to justify spending that much money on doing it again without a real purpose. And I mean, maybe not to this administration, but typically that's how it works. Space race was about proving we could beat the Soviets to the moon. Mission accomplished, competition over. The Soviets weren't trying to land on the moon anymore. They lost the race. So politically, there's not really a point. There's no urgency to do it again. There's no propaganda value for Congress to keep funding it at that level. NASA was already laying people off within 2 weeks of one small step for man, one giant step for mankind. And 3 planned Apollo missions were canceled soon after. Apollo 17 became the last mission in 1972, and President Nixon had wanted to cancel 16 and 17. The only reason they didn't get canceled was because the budget director convinced him that it was important to keep scientists and technicians employed, which I agree with. That is very important to keep scientists and technicians employed, by the way, just saying. Also, the majority of Americans weren't even really that interested anymore. Only 8% of Americans wanted to see astronauts return to the moon. They loved the race. They didn't really necessarily love the idea of a routine. That would just kind of make it If we wanted to go back to the moon in, say, 1975, I mean, we would have still had the technology. There would have still been some leftover momentum. We would have had the facilities. But by the time people started dabbling in interest again, all of that was gone. And now we are essentially rebuilding everything from scratch with all new technology. Obviously, it's going to be spendy. It's going to take some time. And I mean, we're making strides. We made crazy milestones in 2022 and 2026 with Artemis 1 and 2. You remember that? Artemis 1 was in 2022, and it was a test flight without a crew that orbited the moon. Then just this year, do you guys remember when I talked about Artemis 2? I think I called it Artemis 11 because Roman numerals confuse me still. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if it's Artemis 2 or Artemis 11 or Artemis II. I don't know. But remember when I was crying about it? Oh, I got choked up. I got tears. That was the first crewed flight since the Apollo era that flew around the moon. Like, ugh, we were experiencing history. Good times. And there's also some chatter going on that later this decade, there are plans to return to the moon's surface. So the question is, will this be our second time on the moon? Will it be a mission to correct a fake landing? Or will it be another fake landing? Oh, time will tell, friends. Time will tell. And that's all I have for you on the moon landing conspiracies. There are millions and millions of more pieces of evidence out there, I'm sure. But for now, that's all I have for you. So, did this make you a believer? Did we land on the moon? Or did you become more skeptical? Or are you exactly where you were when you started? Wherever you landed, I hope you learned something new. I sure did. Physics can be fun, even for a little dummy like me. And speaking of dumb, guys, I'm going to gab with you some more. So I saw the warnings, but I watched it anyway. The Last House on Netflix. You know how sometimes when you hear really good things about a movie or a show, your expectations are set a little too high and you're almost always kind of let down? And the same goes for the opposite. Like, you're told something is absolute dog shit, but you watch it and you're like, I don't know what all the hate is for. This wasn't bad at all. I kind of liked it. I don't know if I can say that for this movie, for The Last House. So the movie is starring some pretty big wigs who are, in my opinion, good actors based on what I've seen. It stars Greta Lee, who you've maybe seen from The Morning Show, which is where I was introduced to her. She's also in A House of Dynamite, which I've talked about on the show. And she was also in the newest Tron movie. And then it also stars Wagner Moura, who you might have seen him in Civil War. That's, I think, where I was introduced to him. But you've also might have seen him in Elysium, Narcos, or Dope Thief. He's in a lot. Both of these two have a very large IMDb list. So seeing that they were in this movie, I was like, well, it can't be that bad. Like, they wouldn't knowingly be in a bad movie. I'm going to give you my description of the movie. To me, I think my description makes it sound like a good movie. The movie gives COVID vibes, just with a mythological oceanic twist and no face masks. Right? That sounds kind of cool, right? So what's so bad about it? Well, first off, I don't know if it was our speakers or if the audio was weird, but it sounded like it was dubbed over, even though it was in English and they were speaking English. Like, it matched their mouths, but like, you know, when actors have to go back into the studio and record over action scenes or scenes where they maybe didn't get the best audio. I think it's called ADR sessions. I can't remember. I didn't look it up, but it sounded like they were doing that, but maybe the audio engineering didn't match it correctly. I don't know. So that was the first weird thing. And it was right off the bat with the first opening line. I was like, why does this sound like it's not, like he's not saying it right now? Now, I did appreciate that shit hits the fan right away, like right from the start. So our main guy, he goes home from fishing. He didn't catch anything, but he brings home donuts. Then they're all, let's go get a Christmas tree. It's husband, wife, two kids. Mind you, this takes place in or just outside of Seattle. Okay, so keep that in mind because the weather in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest is very specific. So when he gets home, it's pouring rain. Now, when I lived in Portland, which I know isn't Seattle, but it's not that far. When I lived in Portland, I think it downpoured like once or twice in a year. Same with thunder. I think the entire time I lived there, I only heard thunder once, and everyone literally thought it was a sonic boom. And I was like, no, that's thunder. But in this movie, it's raining every single day with like crazy thunder, crazy lightning, which is not natural. And instead of saying, this isn't natural, our guy says, this isn't man made. Bitch, rain isn't man made. Why would you say that? Obviously, it's not man made. And I don't want to give too much away, but I read reviews online where people straight up canceled their Netflix accounts because of this. Some people said it was offensive to their intellect, and also like all physics was just thrown out the window. I guess in this movie it somehow makes sense to have an attic flood but not the garage flood. I don't know. And I guess maybe that's because of the creatures, it's mythological, blah, blah, blah. And then aside from all that, so aside from the audio, aside from the physics and the weather not making sense, there were a lot of animals that died. And I don't like that, okay? And it included their pet dog and their pet fish. And the pet dog scene, I don't think was necessary. I didn't like it. And my biggest gripe with this whole movie, the reason that I don't think it's a good movie, this is going to be a huge spoiler. I know I already gave some spoilers, but this is going to be a big spoiler. My biggest gripe is that not once do they really ever explain or say or explore why any of these things are happening. They don't explain where these monsters come from. They come from the ocean. They don't explain why they're there. They don't explain why they're doing what they're doing. They don't explain why they stopped. And mind you, it's presumed to be at least all of Seattle, maybe the whole world. Everyone is locked in their homes, and they're not just locked in their homes for a couple weeks. They're locked in their home for years. I think, like, if I remember, it said 5 years. And then after just one little incident, they're just free to go, and the monsters go back wherever. Like, why? What? Why? And don't get me wrong, that can be a really great punchline of there's no reason for this. Like, that's the whole point of Strangers, which is a fantastic movie. They executed that perfectly. Why are you doing this? Because you were home. Ooh, chills, chills. It can be done. But this, there was no punch and there was no rhyme or reason. I don't know. And sometimes they would just like freak out over the dumbest things. Like they would put all their energy into freaking out over like trying to break a window to get out of their house. Like so weird. I'm like, why are you freaking out about this right now? I don't know. And there weren't really any character arches. Everything was very shallow. A lot of people online were even convinced that it was just this test by Netflix. And they were saying that this was an AI movie and Netflix was testing to see if we would like it so that they could make more AI movies. Guys, it wasn't AI. And I don't know if that's worse. Like, to be accused of it being AI, but knowing that it was written by someone, I don't know. I mean, I guess I still prefer a bad human made movie over any AI movie, but wow, this was just, it was not very good. It had so much potential and the marketing was amazing. They had this billboard and it had like an actual enclosure, like a living room, and inside it, so it was like 3D, it was popping out or 4D, whatever. And they had a real man living inside it. Like it was truly an art exhibit type of thing. I was like, what is this? I hadn't even seen any previews for it, nothing. But then, I don't know, I started seeing all the jargon online of everybody like, this movie sucks. This movie had to have been written by AI. This movie is a front on our intellect and blah, 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 blah. And I guess all that jargon kind of made me want to watch the movie. So I guess joke's on me, but I don't know. I even felt like it was important for me to warn my parents not to waste their time with it. I also watched Until Dawn on Netflix. This, I didn't realize until after, is based off a video game. It's an interactive survival horror video game. And basically, this is like, to me, this is a fun slasher type of movie. Like, kind of escape room vibes, but it's a world where you're stuck in a time loop. So this group of friends, they go searching for Clover's sister. Also, Clover is played by Ella Rubin, who is in another show I'm going to tell you about soon. I'm gabbing, okay? I said I wanted to. It's my show. So Clover and her friends, they go to find her sister who disappeared the year before. They travel to this abandoned mining town called Glore Valley, more like Gore Valley. And while they're exploring the visitor center, the group gets stalked and they get murdered by a masked killer. Now, I didn't play the video game or even know about it. So I was like, hold up. How are all 5 main characters going to be killed in the first 15 minutes? Oh, ho, 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 friends, enter the loop. So instead of dying and staying dead, there's a timer and it resets when they die and they wake up where they started. They have to relive the night over and over again unless they can make it until dawn. The catch, though, each night has a different threat, different playing fields. They never know what they're going to get, so they can't really learn from their mistakes. It's a fun watch. It's a little icky at times, but honestly, it's not that bad. It's not like super extremely gory. I mean, people do blow up. And it stars some other up and coming big wigs, the girlies who loved Off Campus. You're going to be delighted to see Belmont, aka Garrett Graham. And like I said, it also starts Ella Rubin, who is in another show I just recently watched and enjoyed, Sterling Point on Prime. So there are some trends I'm seeing right now with a lot of the teeny bopper shows. And the trends are hockey and lake houses in Canada. This one, Sterling Point, being a show that takes place in a lake town in Canada. Ella plays Annie Jacobson, who is a high achieving teenager. She gets rejected from an elite business program she was hoping for. And, if that's not bad enough, then her grandpa dies. Now, according to her twin brother, Connor, played by Mark Ruffalo's son, Keen, it's the deadbeat grandfather of their deceased mother. But Annie finds a bunch of letters from her grandfather and her dad's stuff. She finds out he left an entire island and all of his assets to his grandkids. So she sneaks off and she goes to Canada to get answers because she feels like her dad's been hiding something from her. Like, obviously he has. He's been hiding all these letters, and her grandpa has a letter that's like, find her. Find who, right? And also, Annie and Connor are adopted. But when she's at her grandfather's place, she finds out that her mom, her adopted mom who had passed away, had a secret child. And then it just gets wild, and there's so many strings to untangle. Honestly, it's a very delightful watch. The actors are great. It's funny. It's sweet. It's wholesome. The conversations and the dialogue feel really real. Like, when they're frustrated that someone is talking over them, they actually tell them to shut up and tell them that they're talking over them. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes characters are written as just too polite, or the communication is just like out the window and it causes stupid storylines that don't go anywhere, but that doesn't really happen in this show. And the show is created by Megan Park, who you might know from The Secret Life of the American Teenager. She played Grace, like the super religious one. I can't remember if her dad was a pastor or not, but I just remember her being really super religious. We also can thank her for some other really great projects like The Fallout and My Old Ass. My Old Ass is such a great movie. Highly recommend. Out of everything I've talked about today, I recommend watching My Old Ass. I cried so much, but it was just so good. And then, of course, the new season of Ted Lasso. 2 episodes in, it's so stinking cute. Watching Ted Lasso makes me want to be a more positive person. It's such a good show. I'm so happy that we were given another season, because I think that the 3rd season was supposed to be the last one and it was going to be done. And I don't know what made them decide that they wanted to give us another season, but I'm so happy that they did. Also, I am happy that it is episodic, like it's once per week. I think that binging has kind of ruined attention spans. And I mean, some shows, it's perfect to binge because some shows act like a movie, and to binge it all in one setting or 2 days, however short or long you want to take, sometimes it makes sense. But there are some shows like Ted Lasso where it's not like a movie. So it's just better to wait and savor it every week. I don't know. Ugh. Also, I found the recipe for Ted's biscuits that he makes Rebecca. I think Netflix like released the official recipe. I might fuck around and make some of those. We'll see. Let's see what else, you guys. I just love chatting right into your ears. I watched Widow's Bay finally. I think that's on Apple, if I remember correctly. Great show. It says that it's a limited series, but they do kind of leave it open for another season. And honestly, I would be down. They left it open where I have a lot of questions, so I kind of want those questions answered. It is a little creepy, but more importantly to me, it's very quick-witted, it's very sarcastic, it's very funny. I the scary vibes, they're not the typical scary. I think it's more like eerie and like makes you feel a little uneasy. And then the main characters, the actors, they're just so enjoyable and funny to me. I was giggling so much. Um, we were also watching this while we were getting all those thunderstorms, so it was really adding to the vibes. I recommend it. If you have Apple TV, check out Widow's Bay, especially as we're getting a little bit closer to spooky season, because it is kind of like a cozy, spooky, weird little show. I think you'll like it. I know I've watched a lot more, but right now I'm kind of focusing on rewatching Outer Banks because the new and final season is in like 2 days. That show, you guys, that show sucked me in from the preview. I binged it in a day, and then I binged it again with Cole, the first season, not the whole show. This was like during COVID, and it was an instant classic. Then, I don't know, it got a little too fast, too furious, if you know what I mean, but I just can't help but love it. The cheesiness, the over the top action, the yellow filter. I love it. I'm excited. I'm sad that the series is ending, but I mean, the story's done, I guess. There are hints that maybe JJ isn't dead. And I mean, they say you can't kill a pogue, so I don't know. I guess we'll see. And now I will let you guys go. That is all I have for you today. Sorry if my rambling bored you, but maybe you learned something new today. Maybe you found something new to watch based on my wonderful descriptions and recaps. Maybe you changed your mind about a conspiracy theory. Personally, I'm with Bill Nye on this one. I don't think we faked the moon landing, but hey, that's just my opinion. I wasn't there. What's yours? If you have a conspiracy that you would like me to dive into, or if you have any topic ideas you'd like me to discuss on the pod, please let me know. Or if you just want to chat, DM me. You can find the show on Instagram at indistinct.pod, or you can find me at Eliza Hollister. Please also, wherever you're listening, consider liking, rating, commenting, sharing, leaving a review, whatever it is, however giving you feel like you want to be. It helps the show so much, and I am so grateful. We will chat next week. Love ya. Love you. Bye.